In the 1960s, a new musical appeared on the Broadway scene. It was Cabaret by Joe Masteroff, based on the play I Am a Camera by Jonathan Van Druten, in turn based on the book Berlin Stories by Christopher Isherwood. It takes place in pre-Nazi Germany and follows the fast-paced descent of the nation into perceived madness as viewed by a visiting American writer. Cabaret is centered around the vivacious performing girl Sally Bowles, who works at the Kit Kat Club. She meets and falls in love with American writer Cliff Bradshaw. Their romance is paralleled by that of the rueful, elderly landlady Fräulein Schneider and fruit seller Herr Schultz. In the background of all this romance, anti-Jewish sentiment and Nazism grows. The story takes a dark turn when Sally and Cliff must decide whether to escape fascist Germany or remain and see what awaits. They part ways and everyone but Cliff succumbs to the Nazi regime as Cliff rides the train from Berlin to Paris, writing what will eventually become Cabaret itself. The musical was a hit with the American public who saw their own nation reflected in the destruction of Germany. This was because the musical came out at a time when America was going through many tumultuous changes. The civil rights movement had just wound to a quote-unquote close with the enactment of the Voting Rights Act, which was passed in 1965. This brought the subject of oppression to the forefront of America's public consciousness. Also occurring in the 1960s was the hippie movement, which heavily protested the Vietnam War and the traditional American life with slogans such as "Hell no, we won't go," and activities like the Woodstock Music Festival. Happening earlier in the 60s was the Berkeley Free Speech movement. These movements were led by the young people of the nation, paralleling the leadership of the youth in Nazi Germany through corruption. Parents and older generations found the musical resonating with them because of their concern for their children and what the nation was coming to. The musical received wild success, returning 75% of its investments within the year and sweeping that season's Tony Awards with 8 wins. In 1972, Bob Fosse directed a movie version of the musical. It starred popular actress of the time, Liza Minnelli, and reduced the number of outright show tunes, turning the musical into a sort of harsh, cold, documentary-style drama. The movie received great praise, and Fosse received an Oscar for his directing and choreography. The musical continued to resonate with the public, though during this decade it was less about the response of parents to their kids' counterculture and more a reaction to the growing apparent corruption of the government through Nixon's Watergate scandal and the adult public's sudden awareness of the futility of the Vietnam War. The corruption in the American government was mirrored by that of the Nazis in Germany and forced older generations to confront the fact that they may have been complicit in the perceived downfall of their nation. The 1970s was a continued sense of frenzy as the public realized their once stable government seemed to be crumbling beneath them. This all changed in the 1980s with the election of Reagan and the end of the counterculture movements. With the withdrawal of the troops in Vietnam and the maturing of the hippie generation, the nation seemed to have stabilized. The kids who had once been rebelling against the government had grown up and elected the current government. Not only that, the economic disruption of the 60s and 70s had settled down and the nation was on an upward trajectory. Comparatively, the revival of Cabaret was not faring so well. The revival was directed by the same man who had directed the original and relied far too heavily on the original MC without utilizing the full extent of other cast members. According to reviewers, the staging, set, and costumes were also uninspired. It looked like a cash grab attempting to ride on the original run's success. This led to dissatisfaction with the musical, representing the fact that America had moved past its turbulent period and could no longer relate to the way the musical was represented originally. Cabaret exposed the darker side of America that its citizens did not want to realize in the 60s and 70s. It resonated with kids and adults alike as they fought for their country to become a better place, rocketing the musical into success. Once the 80s hit, however, the country found its feet again and was unable to relate to the themes presented in the theater. Once this occurred, the musical faced backlash and a drop-off in success as Americans were comfortable with where their country was.